Hey, good evening. It's Nick Mondello, and we're here tonight with Ron Aprea and his lovely wife, Angela De Niro. And welcome, Ron and Angela.
How are you, Nick? Good to see
Great,
you.
we're doing great. And Ron, just in terms of an introduction, he really needs no introduction around here. But Ron is a outstanding saxophonist, composer, arranger. He's played with just some of the people, Lionel Hampton and Frank Foster and Woody Herman, John Lennon and Billy May. And Angela is an outstanding vocalist, and they both have a number of great CDs out. Uh, a couple of them I had the pleasure of reviewing with the John Lennon tribute, and then the I Remember Blakey, and then Angela's done a number of albums as well. Give me some titles
Okay,
of Angela's albums so I can reference them.
Angela's my favorite album of Angela's is "Swinging with Legends."
That's it. Yep.
We did that in 1999. It was released, and it was with my big band, pretty strong all-star New York band. And the legends were Lionel Hampton, Frank Foster, and Lou Tabakin. And that was my favorite. I've produced a ton of albums. As you know, I had a recording studio in my house, and I was doing a lot of producing. But out of all the productions I've done, that one was absolutely my favorite. It was just an experience that nobody in that studio will ever forget.
No, absolutely not.
One of your most recent productions is your wonderful autobiography titled "The Era I Almost Missed," correct?
Yep.
Okay, can you tell us about the title? How did that come about?
Well, it has to do with the big band era, and
Okay.
and relative to me being born. I was born probably at the peak of the big band era, and I grew up listening to all those great bands, and my mom would take me to the Paramount Theater. We'd catch in them days they had live shows. I don't know if you remember that, but they would have two movies and they would have a live show in between the movies, and they would feature these wonderful big bands. And as a kid, I was just mesmerized, and I'd sit there getting goosebumps listening to Louis Prema's band, blowing the roof off the place. So that was my inspiration to want to be a musician. I would think there were other factors, other things as well, but that I can still remember as a strong in my memory about being inspired to want to play an instrument and be up on a stage doing what they were doing. But by the time I got into the business, and by the time I my chops were ready to go out and start making some bread, that era was almost gone. So I had to adjust to the new music scene, and we had to be a little more flexible, and we had to freelance a lot more. And so because of that, I bounced from band to band, just trying to pay my bills. And
who was still around at that time in terms of the big bands?
Most of the bands that were hitting it in the 40s and 50s, they were still around, but they weren't full-time bands anymore. A lot of them were part-time bands, weekend bands, and also gaps between tours. They weren't as steady. Some of the bands were still going. Duke's band, Basie's band, and Woody's band was still going, but the Miller band and many of those other dance bands and that were big in the 40s. They were kind of like ghost bands now, and they were part-time bands, and they weren't really paying a heck of a lot of money.
What was the first band that you played with?
Oh man, the first band I played with, I would have to say Sal Salvador's band.
The guitarist.
Yeah, I made a couple of rehearsals. Jerry Kell was contracting for his band, and Jerry and I were good friends, and Jerry was also contracting for my rehearsal band. And so Jerry put me on the gig with Sal Salvador's band, and that was my first. It was a one-nighter way up in northern New York, Oswego, I think it was. That was my first. And Gene Quill was playing lead alto. I was playing tenor. It was a great band.
Wow.
Nick Brignola was playing baritone, and a lot of wonderful players.
But he had,
Did you go out on the road?
Oh no, that was just a weekend thing, you know. But my first tour was probably the Elgart band. Richie Bars was my baritone player, and Richie Bars was Elgart's manager as well. So Richie, during one of my gigs, asked me if I want to do a tour with Elgart. So I said sure, and then he went one step further and asked if I want to manage the band, because he was going to be in New York with Larry Elgart, and I was going to be on the road with Les, managing his band. So,
without giving away one of the highlights of the book, you just give us the top line about your incident with Elgart.
Well, I think everybody in the business knows that Les had a drinking problem. Everybody but me knew it. It was interesting, dealing with Les. It was very interesting because he was two people. He was a beautiful guy when he was sober, but when he started drinking, he became kind of violent. And yeah, so there's a chapter in my book that deals with that. It comes off as being humorous, but it wasn't so funny at the time.
No, I can imagine. Talk a bit about some of the mentors like Lionel Hampton and, of course, Frank Foster. You were on Hamp's band, right?
Yeah. Well, I joined Hamp's band in 1969, and I loved playing with that band. It wasn't a big band, by the way. It was only three horns. And I loved playing with just the three horns because there were a lot of soloing,
Sure.
And I was kind of just starting to get my jazz chops together. My improv chops were coming together, and so I really enjoyed that, the whole feel of that band. It was only three horns, but it sounded like a big band. He had an organ player, a guitar player, a conga player, so it was rhythmically it was very strong, and in the horns, it was a powerful small band.
Who was doing the charts for them? Did you do charts for them?
No, I wasn't really doing much writing, much big band writing. I was writing for my quintet in them days, but I wasn't doing any big band writing at that point, or even for the three horns. I was just enjoying the hell out of playing with that band, just touring, and every night was a happening with that band. There was never a bad night, and we always played for packed houses, and they loved him. His connection with the audience was so much fun. Just having an energetic, lively audience who really loved what you were doing, and it was always fun playing with Hamp's band. I played with a ton of bands, and I think probably that band was my favorite for connecting and being,
And Frank Foster.
Frank Foster. Frank goes back to when I was kind of a kid. I had just got my driver's license. I lived in Astoria at the time, Astoria, New York, and I used to jump in my car and run over to Birdland all the time. And them days, for a couple of bucks, you can sit in the gallery and have a beer. Or sit at the bar if you want, or a table. Most times we sat at a table. I would do that with a couple of friends, and we'd get a table. Give PB Marquette a couple of bucks, and he put us right up front. And I loved Basie's band, so we would be sitting right in front of Basie's band, like just holy smokes, listening to these guys. And Frank Foster was blowing me away, and all those beautiful arrangements he wrote for the band. He was my hero. I was in love with Frank Foster. I wanted to be Frank Foster, and here I am meeting him. But I didn't meet him yet. We were sitting at this a great story. I love this. We just sitting there waiting for the band to come out. And in them days, you remember that the photography girls would come around, and I think it was $5 or $10, they would take your picture. It was a gig for them.
Sure.
And so this girl comes over to our table and wants to take our picture. And I said something like, and I was kind of half kidding. I says, if you can get Frank Foster to come over here and take picture. So now the band starts to come out, and she just splits, doesn't even answer my question. So I'm thinking, like, that's a screw you. We're not gonna bring Frank Foster over to meet you. So we sit there and we cast a set, and the Basie band is on fire, and Frank's blowing the roof off the place, and they end with jumping at the woodside, and Frank's just all over his instrument and the energy, and I'm mesmerized by what's going on, and now we're getting ready to leave, and who comes walking over? Frank Foster with the photography girl.
Wow.
You said you were gonna.
She didn't say she was going. She just walked
you
away.
You said you would take it.
Yeah.
Nice surprise.
So she brings Frank over, and Frank sits down, and what a beautiful guy! Just such a sweet man, and we sat there and we talked, and went in that conversation. I had already started the rehearsal band, and I was playing stock arrangements, Johnny Warrington arrangements, the stock you would buy. And in them days, the stocks were terrible, not like today where you can buy, really top-notch arrangements.
Sure.
But so I was playing all these stock arrangements, and I asked Frank if he had maybe some old scores that he might want to share with me. And he right away said, sure. He says, come back. This was on a Saturday, I think. He said, come back like on Wednesday.
Who does that?
And I said, wow, really? He's going to give me some music. So we left, and I came. My friends didn't want to come back with me, and I went by myself, and I was standing at the bar, and Frank comes running down the steps, late as usual. Frank was always a little late. I love Frank, but he had that tardy thing that he just
a little bit behind the beat. Yeah,
a little bit behind. But he comes running in. He goes running over the bar, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "sorry, I forgot to bring the music."
He's apologizing. That's hysterical,
and
right?
I'm thinking, like why he's apologizing to me? So he says, "But don't leave." He says, "I don't want you to leave empty-handed." And 5 minutes later, he's up on the stage with guys, and before the set starts, he's facing the band, and I see everybody passing up music. I said, he can't possibly be getting this music from me from the book. And I see Sonny Payne and all my heroes, Thad Jones, Snooky Young, Marshall Royal. These guys are all passing up parts. After the set, he comes walking over and hands me an arrangement.
So cool.
I still have the arrangement, by the way. And
what was the chart? You remember?
Speak Low. The arrangement, Speak Low. They weren't playing it. I guess it's a great arrangement for some reason. They Hefty was writing a lot of new stuff. Frank was writing new stuff, and they just weren't playing. It was sitting in the book. So Frank pulled it out and he gave it to me.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I walked out there. I was hugging that thing.
Oh my God.
So that was Frank, and that was the beginning of our friendship. I was a kid. He was my idol, and we stayed in touch all the years he played with Basie. Every time he went in town, I'd go over. He invited me up to his house, and I met his wife and his kids.
Really?
Yeah, and we would go to the Parkwoods. Right, he lived on Central Park West, right across the street from the Central Park, and we would take his kids over to the park, and we got to be great friends. And every time I went over, he'd give me a couple more scores, and then I would bring them back, and he'd say, "Oh, did I give you this one yet?" And he'd pull it, and he was just so generous with his music.
Wow.
And so that the friendship went into the relationship went into another gear there. And then when he left Basie's band, of course, he relied on me to help him with the New York Cats, to put his band together, which I did. And then I played with his band. Now we were bandmates. So, and he wound up playing at our wedding.
That was a thrill, boy. I have to tell you.
And then, of course, the Swing with Legends album, he came up and played on that and contributed a bunch of arrangements to that project as well. So we were great friends.
When did you meet Frank Foster, Angela? When did you meet him?
The first time I think it wasn't at our wedding. I had met him before then, right? I don't remember now.
Yeah. I brought you down to a club where he was working in the Village one night, and you met him when we were dating. This is 30-something years ago.
This was after you two met through the Bob Rotunda band, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's absolutely true.
Slowly I turn.
I know you said it. That's funny.
Uh,
That's
for those that don't remember, Bob had a rehearsal band on
Mhm.
Long Island
Mhm.
with all top New York and Long
It
Island
was fun. It
players.
was a lot of fun. Yeah.
But he was interesting to work with, right, Ron?
He was tough, man. He was tough. He was never tough with me for whatever reason. I don't know. But he was a tough band leader, man. He was one of these, I mean, he would make the drummer play a part, by
Now,
himself.
who played first on that band, Angela or you?
Well, there were two periods. I played first with the band.
Right.
Frank
Yes.
Carroll, and do you remember Frank Carroll?
Sure.
Good singer.
Great, yeah,
She
I
sang.
enjoyed her
Actually, she sang with the Charlie Barnett's band and some of the other big bands. She's
Right.
from that period.
Yeah.
Good singer, and she was with Bob Rotunda's band my first time around with Bob,
Mhm.
and then I got kind of really busy doing different things and touring and whatever, and I stopped playing with the band. So I was out with Skitch Henderson's band, and I just got back into town, and the phone rings, and it's Bob, and he wants me to do a sub for a gig that's coming up at Terrace on the Park. So I didn't really want to do it, but we were friends. He was also an artist, and he was doing my album cover at the time.
The
I
artwork,
was
yeah.
producing. Yeah, he was doing the artwork for me for this album, Positive Energy, that I was producing. And so I didn't want to say no. I reluctantly did the gig, and Angela was the new singer. Fran was not with the band anymore. Angela was not with the band. And that's when I met Angela at the Terrace on the Park, which is right here.
I know.
I can see it from my window.
I know.
Now.
We're looking out the window. That's one of the reasons we decided it was,
Is that place still operational?
Yeah.
Is
it
it?
lights up every night. I don't know.
Yeah,
It seems like a waste of electricity if it doesn't.
You know what? It was so ironic when you guys moved to Forest Hills. You look out the window and there it is, right there.
Yeah.
Every night off the terrace, I see the
Oh,
lights go on.
God.
It's great.
I can tell you stories as well, playing there many, many, many times.
Yeah, we don't hear too many good stories about it, but my experience is like one of the best nights of my life, so I'm okay with it.
Oh, absolutely. Wow.
You know what? That's the only time either of us have ever played
Ever
that place.
performed there, yeah.
I've never played there since.
First and last.
So the first time you guys played together.
Yeah.
So you didn't play together on Rotunda's band.
Yeah,
That was
that with
night,
Bob's
yeah.
band.
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
That was the gig. That was the gig. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first experience with a big band. I had only been with the band about a year, I guess, or maybe a little bit less. I'm not sure. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. For me, it was a big kick. Well, I love that music. It was good.
Let's talk a little bit about Steve Medeo and John Lennon.
Sure. Okay. I want to just put a ribbon on that last thing with Frank Foster. This on June 26th. It's coming up next month, the 26th. It's a Sunday. I'm going to be at Birdland with my big band and Angela. And guess who we're going to be doing a tribute to? Frank Foster.
Wow.
I have all that music he gave me over the years. I put it all together. I actually did a montage of all his originals, not his arranged, but his original compositions, the tunes that he wrote and arranged for mostly for the Basie band. Some was for his band, but I put them all into a montage, and I'm going to be doing a tribute to Frank Foster. So that's
with your big band on June
26th at Birdland.
Sunday.
At Birdland in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you got all of the New York cats.
Yeah, I got a great band lined up. All my monster buddies will be there.
Excellent. Okay. Let me just ask you a question. When Frank would give you these charts, did you get the scores as well, or did you have to kind of put them all back, put the individual parts back on the score to study them?
No, what happened was Frank would give me the score, and it was a transpose score, which made it easier for me to copy.
Sure.
I was not a very good copyist in them days. Those early manuscripts looked silly, but they sounded great. They just didn't look too good because I was not a good copier in them days. But he would give me the scores, or loan me the scores, and I would copy the parts and bring the score back. So most of these I don't have the score for, but these are from his original scores. And lately I've been with my Sibelius program. I've been taking all those arrangements that I copied from his scores. I'm putting them into Sibelius so that I have a copy of the scores, and they'll be archived beautifully. You know.
It's nice to see them all like that. Yeah.
Wow. How did you develop your arranging skills?
From
Did you
Frank
study
Foster.
that?
You know, I could talk forever about Frank Foster, but everything I've learned, 99% of what I know about arranging, I learned copying from those Frank Foster scores. I
Wow.
was studying those scores as I was copying them. And then he would actually give me some lessons on the phone. I didn't call him for a lesson. It wasn't supposed to be a music lesson, but we'd be talking. Then we'd get into arranging, and to make a long story short, he spent about an hour with me on the phone one night, showing me how to voice the saxophones in 5-part harmony. You know, so these are the things. And then there was also a rehearsal when he was leading the Basie band. After Basie died, he was rehearsing the band in the city, and every time he was in town, he would call us and invite us to the rehearsal. And so one night we went up to the rehearsal where they were rehearsing, and Jimmy Heath was there trying to sell some of his arrangements. And after the rehearsal, Jimmy, Frank, and Angela and I sat there by the piano, and because I had some questions about brass voicings,
Sure.
and so Jimmy would sit down and he would show me on the piano, and Frank would sit there, and then Frank he would move over, and then Frank would sit down and say, "Okay, you can do it that way, and you might want to try this." And they would show. So they spent a couple of hours with me, showing me all these beautiful voicings. That's how I learned how to arrange. I learned, from copying Frank's scores and from the bits and pieces I would pick up on the telephone or at a rehearsal.
How long ago was it? It seems like yesterday. I could see them both standing by the piano so clearly. It's so funny.
But how lucky was I to have Frank Foster and Jimmy Heath spending a night with me, showing me how to voice brass.
Playing it forward, really playing it forward. Absolutely. John Lennon, Steve Madeo.
Sure. Steve and I were buddies. Steve, we both lived on Long Island at the time, and we played in a lot of bands together. I'm not going to go through the whole story because we won't have enough time. But we became great friends through some rehearsal bands, and he started playing with my big band, and we just hit it off. His personality and mine just lined up. I loved his spirit. He had all this energy, as you know, and he had all this excitement in his playing. He wasn't a school jazz player at that time. He had just graduated high school. He was still a kid, but he had all this energy, and I just loved his enthusiasm, and it came out in his playing. And then he got a call to go on the road with the Butterfield Blues Band, rock group. They were going to use horns, and Steve went out and toured with these guys and loved it. He just fell in love with that whole thing, the energy, the lifestyle, and the packed houses that they were playing for. And one thing led to another, and Steve went from the Butterfield Blues Band to Stevie Wonder, and then eventually the Rolling Stones. And after that, he moved to LA, and he was in the studio doing tons and tons of record dates and making a lot of money. But he called me one night, as he usually did when he was on tour. When he came in town, he would give me a call. And we were on the phone chatting for a good 10 minutes. And then he said something like, "Oh, what are you doing Tuesday night or Wednesday night?" I forget. It was so casual. And I thought maybe he had a rehearsal or something. I said, "Well, what's up?" He says, "I got this recording thing." And again, he was so casual. I thought it might have been a demo he was working on. He was always producing stuff. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'm good." So we continued talking, and by the time we got off the phone, I said, "Oh, by the way, we're ready to hang up." I said, "By the way, who's the record date with?" He says, "Oh, with John Lennon."
I think he enjoyed that though.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
liked to surprise you.
Yeah,
He was setting you up, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
goodness.
that's how I got the gig with Lennon.
Wow. Well, didn't you played in his father's band, though? It's Steve's father's band, right?
I didn't play with Steve's father's band, but Steve's dad, Danny, and I played. In fact, Danny played in Bob Rotunda's band.
That's right.
And a bunch of other rehearsal bands and other working bands that
Sure.
Danny and I played in a lot of bands together. I knew Danny long before I knew Steve, actually.
Wow. Now, how did the actual session go with Lennon? How did that work?
It was scary and it was a little weird. 5 horns. We had a great horn section, all great players. Howard Johnson on baritone, Frank Vicari on tenor, Steve on trumpet, me on alto, and Bobby Keys on tenor. So there were 5 of us, and all strong horn players. But there was no music.
No music.
No music. And I thought Steve was kidding when I asked him to show me. I asked him to show me the alto book, and he says, he says, there's no other book, but it's cool.
It's cool.
I said, what do you mean? Let me see the book. I thought he was kidding around with me, but there was no music, and it was a little tough. And I don't mind faking, but you're in a studio. Time is money. You're gonna sit there and try to make up parts, and
Yeah, 5 horns. Come on.
5 horns and big harmony parts and tunes that originals. We don't know any of these tunes. How's that gonna work?
Did you have tracks before? Were there any other tracks?
Oh, well, there were tracks. They were. So we were basically listening to the tracks, and then Lennon would sit there with his guitar before he played a track. He'd come into the room where we were, and he'd pick up his guitar and apologize for his playing. He said, "I'm not a good guitar player." He said, "But I'll hit." He's so humble.
Amazing.
He's always apologetic. I'm thinking, "You're John Lennon. You don't have to apologize to me."
Wow.
So he would try to give us the feel, and set it up, and then we would sit there and
You guys would collaborate to put the lines together.
yeah.
Wow.
But
And Lennon gave you a very interesting souvenir.
yeah, that was pretty cool. To make life a little less miserable, I asked John to give me his lead sheets. I said, let me see if I can go and photostat these lead sheets, so at least we have an idea what the hell key we're in. We can see what the form looks like. These were original songs. How are we going to do this without a lead sheet? So I got his lead sheets, and I went into another room, and I figured I'd make 5 photostats, one for each of us. And while Steve and I are in there, while we're photostatting the music, John comes walking in, doesn't say anything. He just walks over to the machine, pulls the music out, sticks his face in, and hits the button. I thought, this guy's nuts. What's he gonna go blind? You can't. Those lights, they're blinding. And boom, 2 lights go off, and Steve and I are ducking. What the hell's going on? And 2 photostats come sliding out, and he hands one to Steve, he hands one to me. He says, hang on to it. He says, someday these are going to be worth a lot of money.
Now, do you still have it? You still have it?
It's right here on my wall. Yeah.
Wow.
Steve's got messed up, man. I have the only one. I asked Steve about that. And he said, oh, man, he said, he got all messed up. And he didn't have it anymore. But I have mine in this glass casing type frame.
Wow.
And it looks exactly the way it did the day he gave it to me.
You were the right person to give that to. He has every picture, every piece of music, every letter. He's even got postcards from Frank Foster.
Yeah, I'm a hoarder.
I have.
Oh, no, that's great stuff. That's absolutely wonderful.
It is wonderful. Yeah.
But you also did an album tribute to Lennon, right?
Yeah, I did.
Tell me about that. Tell us about that.
Steve's on it. I thought it was pretty cool. I've been for years wanting to do a tribute to John Lennon, and a lot of friends of mine, a lot of jazz guys. Marcus McLaurin works with my band all the time, my big band and my small band, and he's always saying, "Man," he said, "you should be doing a Lennon album." He says, and he made some sense. He says, not a lot of musicians worked with John Lennon. He said, you're one of a few musicians that worked with him. It's not like a jazz thing, where you're bouncing from band to band. And he was with the Beatles, and then he did 1 or 2 other things, on his own.
Sure.
And not a whole lot of musicians worked with him. And I was fortunate to be one of that small group of musicians. So Marcus kind of was one of the people that kicked me in the pants to do a Lennon tribute.
How did you approach the, Lennon McCartney music? How did you approach it?
Well, I bought a couple of volumes of every song they ever wrote, and it's a big pile of music. And I spent a couple of months going through every tune in those books, and I played them on my alto, and which ones can work with a jazz feel, because
Right.
it's going to be a jazz album.
That's the challenge.
So yeah, and to pick maybe some tunes that not too many other people did as a jazz recording. And I use a string section. I use a small horn section and a string section. And my son Matthew, amazing violinist, he contracted the string section, and so I used horns and strings. And I had my own studio. I thought it was time, and we did it.
I remember Blackbird. That was one of the really highlight tracks on that album.
Thank you. I'm so
Yeah,
glad you said that, Nick. It was one of my favorites.
That's like a 3-part suite.
Yeah.
Started off kind of like a classical piece, but with no real rhythm. Then the middle section goes into this burning thing, and Brian Lynch played the crap out of that. Brian, great trumpet player. I love Brian. We used to do a radio show, Angela and I, on WSHR on Long Island for a couple of years, and this radio promoter sent us this Phil Woods album one time, and I couldn't stop listening to it. Brian Lynch was on the album with Phil. Who's this trumpet player?
Yeah.
Man, this guy can play. So I finally had an opportunity to interact with Brian, and I brought him into the studio, and I featured him. And Steve Medea was on the album as well.
Had you written for strings before?
I did some strings for some of the albums I produced for some of the people that worked in my studio.
Not on that scale, though, I don't think.
No, maybe not on that scale, but I had Matthew put string sections together for other productions that I did.
Was Angela? I forget. Were you on that album too?
I sang Goodnight at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, she's on one of the tunes.
Couldn't resist.
And you did an album, I Remember Blakey. Tell us about that one too.
Remembering Blakey. Well,
Remembering Blakey, right?
Yeah.
that was an album that I did, and the horn section was pretty cool with Joe Magnarelli and Jerry Weldon and myself. I always liked Blakey. Well, sometimes he used 2 horns, sometimes 3. But I used to go down again in Birdland. I'd catch Blakey and all those great bands, Maynard's band, Blakey and Dizzy and the Basie band. I always loved catching Blakey. And all through this project, when I was writing these 3-horn arrangements, I kept thinking about Blakey. So how would Blakey play this? And then when my drummer Vince Cherico came to the studio when it was time to record, he says, "What kind of feel do you want on this, Ron?" I said, "Blakey." And Blakey's name just kept coming back, and the whole thing just had a Blakey feel to it. That high energy 3-horn thing, with the background riffs and stuff. And so I decided to call the album "Remembering Blakey," even though none of the tunes were written or anything that was recorded by Blakey. I don't think he wrote the songs, but it was a tribute to my memory of listening to the Blakey band at Birdland.
Now, how many albums have you done with Angela? Besides
3.
3, yeah.
3, but should I say it now?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're actually working on the 4th right now. And,
we have no choice.
We have a rehearsal next week in the city, and I have a pile of new music that I wrote during the pandemic. We have some original stuff that's just gonna blow everybody away. I think. I have Angela scatting with the entire brass section. It's really some really cool stuff.
You did all the charts.
I did all the arrangements. Yeah.
And besides Legends, what was the other album?
Well, just for the fun of it.
The other one.
Just for the fun of it. Well,
No. Just for the fun of it was a big band album that we did a few years before, Swinging with Legends, and then we did a small group album, Shining Hour, My Shining Hour,
with 3 horns,
Yeah,
and the 3 horns were Scott Whitfield, Don Stickler, and me, and it was a very powerful small band.
And Scott Whitfield, I had to tell you, he drives me crazy. He's such an amazing trombonist. And what the heck? We were doing
Joy
Spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that that son of a gun, man, I've worked so hard getting some, stuff committed to memory and everything. He just starts singing, and he's singing the whole thing for Joy Spring, like note for note with me. And I'm thinking, that's really not fair. You can play the trombone that well, and you can sing that well too. It's just a foul.
He's an amazing trombonist. Not only that, but he's the spitting image of Jack Jones.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
that's so funny. You're right. He
That's
is
right.
now. That's right. Wow.
Yeah.
We played at Mike Vax's thing a couple of years ago out in Phoenix, and I've stayed in touch with Scott and some of the other guys that were out there. But he's originally from Long Island.
Yeah,
I know.
He was born in Good Sam Hospital. I think his father worked for British Airways.
That's funny.
That's what he had told me. And Ginger, of course, is a very fine vocalist as well.
Yeah.
And then he does some of the modern air stuff. They've got a couple of very, very fine albums that they've done, like kind of Jackie and Roy things, that were just really great. But forget about it. He's amazing.
We were doing a lot of work with Scott
Yeah.
prior to Angela's Swinging with Legends album coming out. And during one of the breaks, do you remember Wally Bessa, trumpet player?
The name rings a bell. Yeah.
Well, Wally was doing a lot of contracting, and Wally would call Angela and I up for some of these big band, the park date, the summer concert things that are, I guess, through the union. They were happening all over Long Island, and Wally would call us for some of these dates. And Scott Whitfield was on most of them, so we got to play with Scott, and we got to be good friends with Scott. Yeah. And right after we did the Swinging with Legends album, he comes over, he says, "I'll tell you what," he says, "I'll give you one of my albums if you give me one of yours."
You just had to ask. It's okay.
Right? Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. There is the book. I mean, I've read a lot of these, biographies and autobiographies, but this book has a different kind of how can I put it? A lot of the books are fine, but it's kind of like a litany. I played this one, then I played with this one, then I played with this one. They just, but, your book goes into things that, some of the other writers don't touch on. Like you paid your dues outside of music for a while, with the insurance thing, which of course is nothing to be ashamed of. And you were very successful at that for the short time that you did it, and some other, I remember doing Art Frank's book on Chet Baker, which is also a very interesting book, where they actually got involved in acting, Art and Chet, they were hooked up with Robert Conrad on the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
But your book has a very human element to it. I think that's the real key to it.
That's a nice compliment, Nick. That really is.
And knowing you for so long, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. But I think that that's a really important element of that book that, will touch a lot of people. Yeah. You talk about things in the book like confidence, and things that all the musicians go through. You're working, you're not working, or whatever. Gigs come and go. The other thing that I think would be really interesting coming out of that book is that I think that younger musicians, would gain a lot from reading about your life, in that book. So, it's kind of like the book has other legs,
Yeah.
Where you could talk to young kids, college kids or whatever, and the business has changed so much.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But, you still need chops, you still need to be a personality and a showman and a salesperson and all the rest of it, even with all of the technology that we have, you know. So I think that there's a big play it forward aspect, coming out of that book, you know.
It's nice to know. It's nice to hear because I had no clue how it was going to be received. I was sitting here this was during the pandemic, and I never liked looking back. I'm always looking forward with next gig, next arrangement, new things to play, new tunes, or whatever. I never got into that trap of looking back and sliding on last year's ice. I never did that. I never even talked about any of the bands I played with. Most of my friends don't even know who the hell I played with. It's unimportant to me, and I know I made all the rehearsal bands, and I hear the guys. Well, in '53, I played with Stan, and I never did any of that. I never even kept track, because for me, it was just a way to pay my bills. I was looking for the next gig. I was trying to go forward. I had 4 kids, and I had a house, and I had bills to pay.
Sure.
So it wasn't a party. It was something that I had to do. I had a freelance. I had to make money. I never wanted to look back. You look back, you'll have to walk into a door. I look forward. So it was tough for me to do that. That was what I'm getting to. Like I sat down, and it was a pandemic, and I don't know what it was. I had written a pile of arrangements, about 25, 28 arrangements at the time, and I didn't feel like I wanted to take a little break from writing music. And I said, you know what? Maybe now I'll sit down and do this. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it wasn't easy opening that back door. A lot of those stories are sad,
Sure. The other thing I wanted to ask you, did you ever get into like the studio thing in the city?
Yeah, I did some studio stuff. That was my early ambition, was to be a studio player.
Right.
I was studying with Bobby Tricarico, who was like one of the heavyweight studio guys, and he had me playing clarinet and flute and
all the doubles.
Yeah, and I did some of that.
What about the Broadway stuff? You ever do the Broadway, the pit work?
I did some pit work, and I did a show called Song of Singapore. It was an off-Broadway show, and it
was a great show.
Great show.
Nick. It really was.
Really?
Yeah.
Olive Jackson was on drums. Earl May was on bass. Dennis Wilson was on trombone. It was a jazz thing, and I was doing subs for John Gordon, who's a great saxophone player, and David Glasser and I were both doing subs.
Wow.
For some reason, during this period, John was doing a lot of touring, and he had a lot of other things going on. So David and I were doing most of the shows at this theater. It's a great show, and we were up on stage, and it was a little scary. There's one segment kind of in the middle of the show where I'm trading floors with the lead singer on soprano, and she would scat 4 bars, and I would play 4 bars, and then we'd go back and forth, and then we'd come together with this run, and it had all be memorized. They didn't want me reading music, and then we come together. It's the highlight of the high point of the show.
Right.
And Andrea Green. And when I got through that thing the first night, I thought, wow, let me go get a drink.
Angela, you also have a talent in the voiceover.
Oh yeah, that
right.
It's entertaining. Yeah, something fun to do. Yeah.
You tell us a little bit about that. How'd you get into that?
That's a good. Well,
okay.
Sure. I guess just I loved doing the radio. A couple of people mentioned that we both had nice radio voices and stuff like that. And I don't know. I was literally reading an article about it one time, and they were offering some kind of class, and I went down and I listened, and I remember the gentleman that was giving the class said, "Yeah, most people in here could have good enough voices, but if one out of the 40 people sitting in here actually did it, I'd be surprised. It's just a lot of work." And I thought, okay, that's me. That's it. And Ron set me up with a microphone and all different kinds of things. And then that was it. I just, I used to get up and I just got up every morning and auditioned before I went to work, and did stuff and just kept plugging away. And I really enjoy it.
How about that night we were watching TV and one of your commercials came on?
Oh yeah. I scared the heck out of him. I think you were
kind of cool. She says, wake up. I had dozed off. She goes, oh, my God, yes.
That's me. Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. It's fun stuff.
Do you over?
No,
come on,
no.
Do your overdub voice. Give him a line.
No, I don't get.
It's into another thing completely.
Well, he laughs because we're in an apartment. We have this beautiful a co-op in the city, but I have my own little spot here. My own little studio. But I think he can hear me. So sometimes I get a little paranoid because you do go into another voice, right?
Oh, sure, you have to. It's acting. It's acting.
It's kind of funny.
Wow. It's funny. I've been watching a interview with Alf Clausen, whose name you may know. Alf did The Simpsons for almost 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a 3-hour interview. And Alf was one of my first teachers at Berkeley.
Really?
Yeah, he only taught there for a year, and I was lucky to study with him for a while. And I stayed in touch with him, Yeah. But he talks about, how he arranges and does all of the cues for The Simpsons. He doesn't do it anymore, but for almost, like I say, for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
But, it's a fascinating game. Are you a fast arranger? Are you a fast composer like Billy May was? Or are you kind of like me? Oh, I got to keep changing and changing.
I'm not sure if I even know what fast is because how do I know what the normal speed is? But some things come fast, as you know, and it's the same when you're playing. Some things come easy, some things take forever.
But you get up. I mean, you'll say, "Oh, he finished that in 3 days." But I don't think he sleeps for 3 days. Literally, I'll wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. Where the heck is he? He's already in his studio. Doing. He heard something. That's the way he always says he heard something.
My physical therapist, he's funny. This guy, he says he's every 15 minutes. You got to get up and stretch. That's
not gonna work.
Do you work from the keyboard? Do you work from piano? You have piano chops?
Well, I do have piano chops, but I don't use the piano for arranging. I'm using this Sibelius program. And you type it in with a keypad.
Nick, you know what he says to me? He says to me, I'm not. He said it's already up here. I've heard the whole arrangement in my head. All I have to do now is get all the parts out onto the computer. He's got the whole thing.
Yeah, that's genius. That's the guys that can do that. Billy May was like that too.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the way I was taught. I don't even remember where I read that, but one of the early books that I was looking at, it might have been a Sebesky book. I'm not sure. But they talk about put your pad down and just get your score pad down and just get a regular pencil and paper and hum the thing in your head and write down in English, what you're doing, like 8-bar intro, brass, blah, 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 saxes, change keys at letter G, and try to hear the whole thing. Sit there and hum it in your head. And as you're humming it, write down as much as you can. And by the time you're done, you got the whole picture already. Yeah. Now it's just plugging it in and figure out the notes. But that would be my advice to younger arrangers. Sit down with a pencil and paper and write and hum it and write it out and make all the and then when I'm putting it on the score, I'll say I'll pull that paper up and I'll say, oh I forgot. Yeah, I'm going to do this over here, and that works. That works for me, and I think it would work for most people.
Did you ever write for some of the work that Matt, your son, did? String work, other than the album? Like classical stuff. You ever write any classical stuff for him?
No, I never really did. I love classical music, and I became comfortable with classical music, and I appreciated it more when Matthew started studying and playing. He played with the New York Youth Symphony, which is about as good as it gets. These kids are the best kids on the East Coast, and they play at Carnegie Hall twice a year.
Wow!
He auditioned and made that symphony, and we used to sit in those tiers in Carnegie Hall, listen to our kid play with this amazing.
Wow.
music. I fell in love with classical music, but I never tried writing anything like that.
Interesting.
I don't know if I could.
What's coming down the pike after the June gig? What do you got in mind?
An album. We got to get an album going. You know,
The album?
it's been too long. We want to do an album. We want to lose some more money.
Sorry. No, I have to buy a lottery ticket, right? What's the old joke? I'm gonna win $10 million so I can stay in the music business for another few years.
Yeah.
Well, you got the Kentucky Derby on Saturday, so
Okay, all right.
which reminds me, you used to be a pretty good athlete.
Oh,
Yeah, I played a lot of sports. I played a lot of baseball. I played ice hockey until I was almost 50.
Wow.
Right on Long Island, a place called Racket and Rink.
Sure.
Where the Islanders used to practice. We had like a scrimmage type thing, like once a week I'd play there. But I played roller hockey when I was a kid. I played a lot of baseball. I played football one year. Didn't like it. It just hurts.
Wow.
Too painful.
And now we sit here at night. And we can tell you when the Mets are at home, you know, because we can see the lights on. And
You can see the ball.
Yeah, we're big baseball fans.
I know.
I go back and forth with the Mets and Yankees. You're a Yankee fan, you're a Met fan? No, I'm a New York fan. I root for all the New York teams.
Baseball, absolutely.
Yeah.
Where can people get the book?
On my website, ronaprea.com.
ronaprea.com.
That's right.
And they can get what? Ebook, hardcover. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hardcover too.
This is the hard copy.
And
Okay.
A lot of pictures in here too.
comes signed. He signs all the books, which is
I always liked photography. I would always take cameras around, you know, little Instamatic cameras, and so many of the things, the Lennon stuff, and a lot of the bands I played with. This great photos of I captured all those special moments. Even there's a picture with me and Hamp and Satchmo hugging. You know,
that's pretty cool.
Wow.
We played a gig on Long Island one night, and Satchmo was in the audience with his family, and of course Hamp told him to come up and play. And again, this is a small group, just 3 horns, so we all interacted. It was kind of cool.
Wow, isn't that something?
I was a kid, man, playing alongside Louis Armstrong. It was such a kick. You know?
Something tells me that you two still are kids. You know, when it comes to you know.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you approach it any other way, you might as well not do it. You know,
we have fun. We
No,
do have fun, you know.
Absolutely. And you make great music together, and you've got a wonderful story to tell. And again, it's The Era I Almost Missed. Available at ronaprea.com.
You see right behind his head. We had this nice little canvas print.
There you go.
That was my Christmas gift. She had it mounted on canvas.
That's great. And again, June 26th, Birdland, New York. 1 show, 2 shows. What time?
One show. I think it's 5:30. I think is the show. I think right 5:30.
Yeah.
26th, Birdland.
Yeah.
Check it out. Ron and Angela, thank you so very, very much.
So good to see you, Nick.
It's always a pleasure, and we're going to get this up on YouTube and circulate it around to folks all around the world that may not have been up right now, and we'll go from there. Thank you both so very, very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, great weekend, and it's always a pleasure seeing the both of you. Okay, guys?
You too, Nick.
Take care now.
Great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.